Biafra, the war that changed Nigeria. Season 1, Episode 1. Before Nigeria became Nigeria. Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that your village, your kingdom, your culture, and your future had been merged into a country that never existed before. No referendum, no vote, no consultation, just a signature on a piece of paper thousands of miles away. Today, millions of Nigerians identify proudly as Nigerians. But there was a time when Nigeria did not exist. Long before the name Nigeria appeared on a map, the land was home to powerful kingdoms, thriving empires, independent communities, and proud peoples who spoke different languages, practiced different traditions, and governed themselves in different ways. Some historians believe that understanding how Nigeria was created is the first step toward understanding why the Nigerian Civil War, also known as the Biafran War, happened decades later. This is the story of how a country was born, and how the seeds of a future conflict may have been planted from the very beginning. Long before European ships appeared on the West African coast, the region now known as Nigeria was already home to advanced civilizations. In the north, powerful Hausa city-states flourished as centers of trade and learning. Cities like Kano, Katsina, and Zaria became important commercial hubs connected to vast trans-Saharan trade routes stretching across Africa. Merchants traded gold, leather, salt, textiles, and knowledge. Islam spread across the region, influencing education, government, and daily life. Farther west, the Yoruba kingdoms built remarkable political systems. The ancient city of Ife became famous for its artistic achievements and spiritual importance. The Oyo Empire developed one of the most sophisticated military and administrative structures in West Africa. Meanwhile, in the southeast, Igbo communities organized themselves differently. Instead of centralized kings ruling vast territories, many Igbo societies operated through assemblies, councils of elders, age grades, and community consensus. Leadership often came from influence, wisdom, and achievement, rather than inherited royal authority. Though different in structure, these societies were vibrant, innovative, and deeply rooted in their traditions. Each region had its own identity, its own culture, its own way of life. No one called themselves Nigerian, because Nigeria did not yet exist. Everything began to change when European powers turned their attention toward Africa. Portuguese explorers arrived first along the coast in the 15th century. They were followed by traders from Britain, France, and other European nations. At first, trade focused on goods such as ivory, spices, and palm products. But soon, a darker business emerged: the transatlantic slave trade. For centuries, millions of Africans were transported across the Atlantic under brutal conditions. Communities were disrupted. Families were separated. Entire regions suffered enormous social and economic consequences. By the 19th century, the slave trade gradually declined. But European interest in Africa did not disappear. Instead, it transformed. The new goal was control, and Britain had its eyes fixed firmly on the territories surrounding the Niger River. In the late 1800s, European powers raced to claim African territories. Historians call this period the Scramble for Africa. Countries such as Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, Portugal, and Italy competed aggressively for land, resources, and influence. African communities had little say in the process. At the famous Berlin Conference of 1884-1885, European leaders gathered to divide large parts of Africa among themselves. Remarkably, no African representatives were invited. Lines were drawn on maps. Territories were assigned, and the future of millions of people was decided without their participation. Britain gradually consolidated control over various territories surrounding the Niger River. The groundwork was being laid for something entirely new, something called Nigeria. By the early 20th century, Britain controlled two major territories: the Northern Protectorate and the Southern Protectorate. Managing them separately was expensive. British administrators sought a more efficient solution. One man would become closely associated with that decision, Frederick Lugard. Lugard believed the territories should be merged into a single administrative unit, not because the people shared a common identity, not because they requested it, but because it was convenient for colonial administration. On January 1, 1914, Britain officially amalgamated the Northern and Southern Protectorates. A new entity was born, Nigeria, a name reportedly inspired by the Niger River. The people living within the new borders were suddenly citizens of a country many had never imagined. The new colony was extraordinarily diverse. Hundreds of ethnic groups, hundreds of languages, different religions, different systems of governance, different historical experiences. The North remained largely influenced by Islamic institutions and emirate structures. Many parts of the South experienced greater exposure to Western education and missionary activity. Economic opportunities developed unevenly. Political expectations evolved differently. Yet all were now expected to function under a single colonial framework. Over time, these differences would shape political debates, competition, and misunderstandings, not because diversity itself was a problem, but because managing such diversity fairly would prove extraordinarily difficult. For decades, British colonial rule continued. Railways were built, administrative systems expanded, trade increased, but questions remained unanswered. Could such diverse peoples truly become one nation? Would every region feel equally represented? Would political power be shared fairly? As the 20th century progressed, nationalist movements began demanding independence. A new generation of leaders emerged. They dreamed of a free Nigeria, but they would also inherit the challenges created by colonial boundaries and regional divisions, challenges that would eventually contribute to one of Africa's most devastating conflicts, the Biafran War. And so, the story begins. Long before the gunfire, before the headlines, and before the world would come to know the name Biafra, there was a land filled with diverse peoples, ancient kingdoms, and cultures that had thrived for centuries. The creation of Nigeria in 1914 would change the course of history forever. But as we've seen today, the foundations of a nation are often more complex than they first appear. In our next episode, we'll explore how Nigeria moved toward independence, the hopes that united millions, and the political tensions that quietly grew beneath the celebrations. Because sometimes, the events that change history don't begin on the battlefield. They begin years before anyone realizes a storm is coming. If you enjoyed this story and want to follow the complete journey through the Nigerian Civil War and the history of Biafra, don't forget to like this video to support the channel. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next episode. Follow us on TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook for more African history, untold stories, legends, mysteries, and powerful storytelling content. Leave a comment below. What part of Nigeria's early history surprised you the most? Your likes, comments, and shares help keep these important stories alive for future generations. Until next time, this has been Biafra, the war that changed Nigeria. Episode 2, The Birth of a New Nation, coming soon.